Our speaker today is Brian Hill. He'll be speaking on a warden's experience or how I escaped with my sanity. Brian was the warden for 17 years at the Monroe County Correctional Facility in the Poconos, where he revolutionized the management of inmates. He did this with a relatively new concept of direct supervision. He started his career in corrections in a very unique way, and he'll explain how he began as the warden with no background in corrections. As a result of his success, he further distinguished himself in the field. He served on the board of directors of the American Jail Association, and as its president, he served on the delegate assembly of the American Correctional Association and chaired the Adult Local Detention Committee. He was a sought-after technical assistant consultant for the National Institute of Corrections, Jails Division, part of the U.S. Department of Justice, and the American Jail Association. He taught jail management, conducted staffing analysis, and was an expert witness. Brian and his wife have lived at Masonic Village for over 10 years, and he's also a member of Moody Brewery, which is where I met him. So let's welcome Warden Brian Hill.
See if I can untangle this, because I'm used to moving around a little bit when I speak. I do have a few things I have to say, and number one is I thought that I was speaking at the Monday Rotary Club at Moody. Secondly, I'm a recovering Kiwanian. Good, thank you. Both fine organizations. Now, if I can do this right, now Denise told you that I started out in a very unique way. So the first question is, what do Volkswagens and Audis and a jail key have in common? Not much. I was selling Volkswagens and Audis one day, and I was the warden the next. My first day on the job, that's what I encountered. Now, there was a fire after this photo was taken many years ago, so that top third was no longer there, but it was built in 1872. And I got there full of confidence that I could do this job, and I said to the Lieutenant, take me for a tour. He said, well, where do you have to take your tie off? And I said, why? He said, they might grab it and throw you over the tier. And I walked back into the cell block, and I thought, oh my God, this looks like a territorial prison. What have I gotten myself into? Now, I was lured into this by the sheriff at the time because he thought that because of my background, I was a field executive with the Boy Scouts, and especially that I sold Volkswagens and Audis, because the idea of building a new jail was not very popular because those dirtbags, why do we need a new facility for them? So he thought that I could go out and speak to groups and build some community support for it. And I love to speak to women's groups because I would ask them, have you seen the new image of wardens? Robert Redford, Brubaker. And that's when I started to get the idea to wear bow ties, not knowing that I would be as fashionable as Tom LeBall. That's the other confession. I didn't think he'd be here today, but I'll try to be adequate. Okay. Well, we had a 2-year delay because nobody wanted the jail situated, not in my backyard. So a group of citizens and the township brought suit against the county. Well, the president judge, I wouldn't say dallied around with it, but he was researching it for 2 years, and finally threw them out of court, saying the county doesn't have to ask you for permission to build a jail in your township. So that gave me some time to experience other jails. I got to visit jails around the country. I went to the National Institute of Corrections jail management course, where I learned a little bit more about the craft and what I needed to do. And I got this idea that, there's probably a better way to do this than what I saw when I got into that old jail. So I found out about something called new generation jails, where the architecture was different. It was softened. Now, to give you an idea, in our cell blocks in the new facility, if you're familiar with this end up furniture, that wooden furniture looked like crates, that's what we had for furniture. Now, all of the experts said the inmates will pile those up in the middle of the cell block and burn them down. Well, that never happened because, along with new generation jails, it was the concept of direct supervision. And because we started in this early enough, Bucks County had a new generation direct supervision jail. And our idea was we wanted to be the same as Bucks, but better than Bucks. And we did it. Okay? That's a picture of the new jail. You can see that's quite a difference from the 1872 jail. At the time, this was state of the art. I had a tough time convincing the architects that I knew what I was talking about, because they would say to the county commissioners, well, you know, the warden's just a car salesman. We built other jails. We know what we're doing. Well, in the long run, they realized that I did know what I was talking about. And as they designed new jails, they designed one like this because they found out this was the way to go. Okay. Now, we had a lot of fun. We built this jail. Back in the day, it was $25 million, which was a lot of money. And we thought, how can we, as part of our transition, get community support? So the one thing that we did was we had 5 nights of slumber in the slammer, and that was the t-shirt. I partied in the Pocono Pokey. We actually locked people down overnight, and they paid for the experience. And we made a lot of money, and we gave it to a number of charities, building a lot of goodwill in the community by doing that. We also had over 10,000 people toured the facility before we opened it. That was a twofold purpose. One was we told the news media, interview people on their way in. And they did, it's the Taj Mahal. They shouldn't have wasted all this money on those dirt bags. And then they interviewed them on the way out. And they all said the same thing. It's nice, but it's a real jail. Those folks that spent overnight there were ambassadors. They would tell 25 or 30 of their friends and neighbors who would repeat their stories that it was nice, but it was a real jail. And when that door closes and you know you can't get out, they got the feeling of what it was like to be incarcerated. So they were our ambassadors out there telling folks what a great place it was. My wife stayed in jail overnight. And I didn't want to let her out, but that's okay. A radio station actually did their show from the jail. So because of this, we had a lot of goodwill in the community, which you need because bad things happen in jails. No matter how well a facility is run, something bad is going to happen. And if you have goodwill in the community, they're going to say, I know they'll take care of it. We know things happen in the jail. So I got away with a lot of things. In 17 years, I had one guy figure out how to get over the fence. The top of the razor wire was not attached to the building. And he climbed up the fence, used a t-shirt to push the razor wire away, jumped down, climbed the second one, and we had him back within 10 minutes because the system worked. That I had a perimeter security officer. We had people that were on the ball. They tackled this knucklehead midstream in the creek and dropped his pants to make sure he didn't have any weapons on him. That afternoon, I got a call from a friend of mine in the Northern Ireland Prison Service, a deputy governor of the Maze prison. That's where they kept the IRA prisoners. And I told him what happened. He said, oh, Brian, you didn't have an escape. You had a breach of security. So That's what I started calling it, a breach of security. And I got away with it. And why? Because of the goodwill in the community. People believed that we knew what we were doing, that we were running a good facility. Much to the consternation of the county commissioners, who thought we finally got that SOB where we want him. He had an escape. So they said, we're going to have a security audit of the jail. So one of the county commissioners said, you know, the National Institute of Corrections Jail Center will send somebody in to do it, and we won't have to pay for it. So he called and talked to a lady named Ginny Hutchinson, who was from Carlisle originally. And after he got done talking to her, she called me because I was one of her consultants. She said, I told her what happened. He said, give me the name of 3 consultants. So I did. And the county commissioners chose a commissioner from the Commission on Corrections for the state of New York. He had already been in our facility twice, along with the rest of the commissioners, to experience what we were doing there. They changed the standards for the state of New York because of what they saw at the Monroe County Correctional Facility. And then he chastised them for building 2 soccer fields next to the maximum security yard. So it blew up in their face. Okay? Now, direct supervision is an officer is in direct contact with the inmates. They're not outside bars looking in. They're right in the housing unit. And they're supervising the inmates. It's kind of like community policing, if you're familiar with that concept, with getting to know your neighborhood and the people in your neighborhood. And that's what the officers did. Okay? That's really down and dirty. There are 9 principles of direct supervision. And if this were a different group, I might tell you about it, but we'll make it a secret. Okay? We believe that we should be proactive, not react to things that happen. And you do that on an individual basis with something called IPC, interpersonal communications. So we taught our officers how to deal with people, how to de-escalate a situation. So we didn't have the problems because we addressed it up front. Inmates would tell you, I'll give you an example. Somehow an inmate got a piece of rod. It must have come out of a locker or something. 18-year-old kid, he decided that since he was going to be going to state prison, that he could be a real bad guy if he took that and put it in my ear when I came around on an inspection tour. The other inmates told the officer, hey, that guy's got some contraband. We think he's going to try to do some harm to the warden. So it works. If you've got a personal relationship with the inmates, not a buddy, but someone you talk to, someone that has respect for you, no one was called by their first name in that facility. Every inmate was Mr. or Ms., whatever their last name was. And I was Warden or Mr. Hill, including people that knew me that might have gotten into a fight after being in a bar, and they went out to have a little breakfast and got into a fight, and I would see them the next morning, and they would call me Brian. And the lieutenant would dress them down right properly, he being a former Marine anyway. So when we say no bats and hats are truncheons and hard hats. We didn't believe in that. Now we taught that. We had a corrections empowerment or corrections emergency response team in case the wheels did come off the wagon, because it could happen. You have to be ready for it. Those of you that were Boy Scouts know, be prepared, right? Okay. People are surprised to learn that 30% of the staff were women. The old sheriff that originally hired me made a comment in the newspaper, I may be an old-fashioned Methodist, but I don't think women ought to be working in jails. But they worked out very well. Very, very well. There was a study done of the characteristics of what a direct supervision officer should be like, and it lined up with educators and mothers. Male inmates don't get any points given a female corrections officer a bad time. They do if it's a man, but not a woman. And they worked out just fine. And there were some of them were about this tall, that if I got myself in trouble, I'd want them rather than some of the 6'2", 6'3" guys, because they had heart, and I knew they'd be with me. And I will, at a little aside, we thought we were really enlightened because we were bringing women in. Well, I met with a lieutenant. She was the first California Highway Patrol woman, and she was a shift supervisor in the Civil Branch Institute in Los Angeles County. That's a woman's facility. There were 2,200 inmates in that one facility in Los Angeles County. And I told her how, we're going to bring in some female officers from other facilities to tell our, for instance, our women what to do if a male offender exposed himself. She shook her head and she said, "You're 180 degrees out." And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "You never have special training for women and men. Everybody needs to be trained alike. Men need to be instructed on what they do if a female offender exposes themselves." And a light bulb went off again. We were 180 degrees out. When we sent our first group to the academy at Camp Hill, because it was mandated by law, we didn't really want to do it, our county purchasing agent assured us that the uniforms that we were buying were made for women, but they weren't. They had to be tailored for women. So we're about to send them out, and we don't have uniforms for them. And I don't want to send women out there without uniforms. So I remembered when I was at the FBI Academy, the baby agents had golf shirts and khakis, like I'm wearing today. We had our logo embroidered on it, Monroe County Corrections. We dressed everybody that way. We sent them to the state. The first day people were making fun of them. "Is that your uniform?" And he said, "No, this is our training uniform." So the next day when they've been sitting around in those stiff uniforms, my folks were feeling like they were special. And they were. Okay. Yeah, here's something that we had a lot of mantras in direct supervision management. One of them was, without consequences, there can be no control. Now, I think we can see that in some of our cities today. There are no consequences for your actions. But we found that as soon as someone came into the jail, we assumed rational behavior, if you can imagine that. Assume rational behavior. So you've just been fighting with police officers, and they drag you into the jail, and you're met by someone your size who tells them, "You're going to come in," they tell them what's going to happen. "We're going to let you make all the phone calls you want, because if you do, they might get bailed out, and we don't have to put up with them," right? And then we give them a handbook, we gave them a video, and we taught them all the things they should have learned in kindergarten. How to play nicely with others, share your toys, take your nap, clean up after yourself. So you would give them all of the expectations that you had of them. And if they violated those expectations, there were consequences. And one of my favorite stories is every Thursday, 2 of my 3 deputy wardens and I would inspect the entire jail. So I go into the restricted housing unit, which is our disciplinary unit, and I walk into a cell and there's an 18-year-old young man there, and he says, "Warden, you're not going to break me." I said, "I think you've been watching too many prison movies. That's not how it works." And I explained to him that when you came in, we told you what we were expecting of you. And if you don't deliver on that, you end up in here. But if you go along with the program, you'll be in general population. So the next week I went around and I said, "I got to inspect that cell again." And I went in and the kid said to me, "Warden, I get it. We didn't change his character, but we changed his behavior, which is very important to have people turn their lives around. Because our idea was we were not going to make anybody worse than they were when they came in. We're trying to make them better. Give them tools so they can be successful, so that they can receive the ultimate punishment. Make them a taxpayer. So that we believe that wholeheartedly. Without consequences, there can be no control. Safety of the staff and inmates. Sometimes there's a surprise when you say safety of the staff and inmates. Really? Yeah. Americans, by and large, consider themselves privileged to be recipients of justness and fairness. So if we treat people justly and fairly, they're going to respond to that. They're going to respond appropriately. When that happens, and you have programs for inmates, they're going to go to those programs not to escape what's going on in their housing unit. They're going to go there because they want to learn something. So when you teach people life skills and so forth, when they have that V8 awakening because either they've matured or they get it, and they slap themselves in the head like the old, I could have had a V8 commercial, I don't have to go to jail anymore. We're confident that we've done our very best to give them the tools to be successful. Okay? Yeah, leadership is something that everybody talks about, leadership. But the real leadership is getting people to go along with the program. So we have that, people tend to support those things which they help to create. And during this whole process of putting the new jail together and transitioning in, we did that. We explained why we did everything. I had a whole afternoon with every new class where we did exercises so that people understood why we were doing what we were doing. So it made sense to them after a while, and that's why everybody bought into the program. Now, after I left, one of the shop stewards said, "Hey, can't you come back?" And I said, "No, I got a pretty good gig going. I can't come back." I said, "I thought you hated me." He said, "Well, we didn't hate you, but you were always right." And then he said something that it took me a long time to process. "You made us do our job." And I didn't understand what he meant by that. It meant that I paid attention. When I saw something that was right, I told people what a great job they were doing. If they weren't doing a good job, I told their lieutenant, who told them they weren't doing a good job. Whoop, let me go back. Yeah, we had such a reputation that the American Jail Association and the National Institute of Corrections used our facility as a model jail and a laboratory for classes that they had. One year we had visitors from Northern Ireland, England, Germany, South Africa, and Guam. So it wasn't just the United States. People came to see the facility, mainly because they were paying them. They paid their way there, I think, is what the real reason is. Okay, I told you enough about the jail, but what do cell keys and a beautiful bridge in the beautiful Delaware Water Gap of Pennsylvania have in common? Not much. Because I was approached at a fundraiser for a friend of mine who was running for state representative by a commissioner for the commission, who said, "We'd like you to be the district superintendent." What the heck's the bridge commission? What does a superintendent do at a bridge commission? So one day I was the warden, and the next day I was a district superintendent running 4 bridges, 3 of them toll bridges, with all kinds of responsibilities for toll collection and public safety and maintenance and all that stuff. And how did I do it? The same way I did the jail job. Leadership. A leader does not have to be technically qualified. I never put handcuffs on anybody. I know how to do it, but I had people that did that. And I would understand what they were doing. And if I didn't, I would find out why they did it. With the Bridge Commission, they were scared to death. Why did they hire a warden? Did he come in here to fire everybody? And the first day I got there was nobody there because they started at 8:30, not at 8. Because I said, well, 4 o'clock's quitting time. You must start at 8. And I found out it's a 7-hour day. I thought, whoa, I won the lottery. Wow. So I walked across the street, and the maintenance folks were there. And in those days, they wore orange. And I walked in. I said, you really make me feel at home. They were scared to death of me. And at the end of the first week, foreman came over and he said, you know, we were scared to death of you, but you're really a nice guy. I said, never make me mad. It's not a pretty sight. And after about 6 months, something made me mad. And he said, you're right, I don't ever want to see you mad. So that's how I escaped with most of my sanity. So, questions, comments?
I'm sure it was a bigger transition going from a constable to warden. What were you thinking, and talk more about that process?
Well, when I walked out of Kiwanis meeting, and the chief deputy sheriff said, hey, the boss wants to talk to you. And I went up to his office, and he talked in a great big circle because his friends and relatives called him Windy. And finally he said, we'd like you to be the warden. And of course my jaw hit his desk. Really? And I went home and I told my wife, and she said, it sounds like a good idea. And my jaw hit the dinner table. Well, the attraction for me was to do something that would be a challenge, because selling cars, it's okay. And it was when the economy was really heating up. When Reagan came in, the economy improved, and we were selling cars because there was a great demand for cars at the time, because people were hanging onto their cars. So money-wise, would have been smarter for me to stay selling cars. But I wanted the challenge. And the challenge of not only learning something brand new, but actually having something to do with the creation of a new jail. The actual design and transitioning into a new jail was I think I was out of my mind, but I wouldn't advise anybody else to do the same thing. But I think I was able to do it because of good leadership training that I had in the Boy Scouts, that I think I was able to handle people better because of partly selling cars. You have to be a good listener, and you have to be smart about what you're doing. So I think that's how I did it. If that answers your question.
Did you get a lot of, like, would community or politicians sort of push back against the idea of, like, rehabilitation? You know, do people expect punishment instead of trying to work on getting people to be able to re-enter society?
Well, curiously, when I used to speak to high school groups and college groups, they were punishment oriented. People in there for punishment. I think as you get a little bit older, you get a little bit smarter, and you say, well, yeah, having your liberty taken away from you is the punishment. Not anything that we would do after that. You know, no beating people up and that sort of thing. You know, if you realize that you're working with human beings, and you can get that idea across to your staff that these are human beings that we're working with and treat them humanely, hopefully you can do something about it. Unfortunately, you would keep seeing the same people come back, and you would think you were not successful. But you're an attorney, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I woke up one morning and the headline in the newspaper was, AIDS-infected hooker arrested for murder. So I read the article, And here this hooker came up with a John from New York City to the beautiful Pocono Mountains of Pennsylvania, where he mixed himself a speedball that she injected in him, and he overdosed and died. It was re-election time for the district attorney. That's why the headline was like that. Well, it's time, when I first saw her, she was emaciated, she had sores on her, definitely suffering from AIDS. And we nursed her back to health, got her on the proper medications and so forth. And ultimately, the district attorney, after he got reelected, dropped the charges. So she went back to New York, and we didn't hear anything about it. And I went to a Kiwanis meeting, and one of our members, who was an attorney, was reading the Sunday Times, and he gave me a copy of the article, and it was about her. She went back to New York. She got a job in the Bowery Mission. She got her kids back, and she said, I have the people at the Monroe County Correctional Facility to thank for that. Now, that's one of those successes you never would have heard about if it wouldn't have been in the New York Times. And you know, I photocopied that, plastered that article all over the jail, because you don't know when you have a success, because they never come back again. And you don't know why. Did they move? Did they have that V8 awakening and decide that they were going to be taxpayers? So that's the payoff. Yes?
So what was the capacity of the old prison versus the new prison? And the second question would be, what's your take on the new facility proposed in Lancaster County?
The old facility held 68. The new facility was designed for 180, but we immediately doubled all the cells up, so it was about 300 cells. And if you subscribe to the thinking that if you build it, they will come, we filled it up pretty quickly. But we had federal prisoners, and so we took prisoners from other jurisdictions and the feds, where we had such great things as a mafia don. That was pretty cool. Who, when I went around on an inspection tour, had taken a newspaper and folded it up like an admiral's hat. And I don't know, I was like, whoa, this is some strange stuff. All I know about the new facility is what I read in the newspaper, but I do know that the design firm that they've purchased or have retained have a very good reputation. One of my friends, also a past president of the American Jail Association, is one of their consultants, and I know that he'll try to steer them the right way. But other than that, I was in the old Lancaster County prison. I wasn't really impressed with wherever we went. We had an officer with a big German Shepherd. And I used to walk through my facility all by myself and go into all the housing units. We ate the same thing that the inmates did. We had a dining room next to theirs, but we went through the same line that the inmates did. In fact, one day I was in line and I was dressed like this, and the inmate thought that I was a trainee. So he started to give me a bad time, and I said, you know, you're going to have to speak up. I had my big badge on. I said, the eagle can't hear you. You're the warden. Yes, I am. Do you want to get ahead of me? No, I have more time to eat than you do. And the other inmates just gave him such a bad time. But I just don't think it was a good idea when they had that old facility. You build two towers and in the same footprint was not a good idea. Putting it out where they have it now is an excellent idea, in my opinion. You're able to spread it out. You're able to have it on one level rather than multi-levels. There are disadvantages to having multi-level facilities. So they're doing the right thing. Hopefully they're going to do it right. They're doing the right thing. Hopefully they'll do it right. And I don't know. I know what you know from reading the newspaper.
I do have another question. So do you drive, I want to know what you drive, a VW or an Audi?
I drive a Ford Flex. Yeah. Yeah, I had a Vanagon, and it was supposed to be good in snow, and it wasn't. So I went to Kiwanis, and I said to the Ford dealer, "Do you have any four-wheel drives?" And he said, "Yes." And I got it, and I liked it, and I've been driving Fords ever since. I'm not sure my next one's going to be a Ford, though, because they don't make the Flex anymore. If any of you even know what a Flex is. You know, it was their best kept secret. It's a great vehicle, but yeah. Okay. Oh,
Did you have any special training in Boy Scouting that helped you?
leadership training, junior leader training.
Like Wood Badger?
I'm a wood badger. Yeah, and
What animal?
and I was a scout executive with the Boy Scouts, and we learned more leadership in the national institute that they have
What
for.
animal are you in Wood Badger?
I'm an owl, wise woodsy owl, and you?
Oh, a bear.
A bear. Okay. Okay. Well, thank you very much for listening to me.
Appreciate it.
Well, Jeff, I have something for you.
Is it a lawyer joke?
No. Tom LaBall says it could not. There's a get out of jail free card. Is that adequate?